The unforgiving Arizona desert, 1876. Gray Wolf, a lone Apache warrior, stumbled through the barren landscape, his once powerful frame weakened by 5 days without food. The harsh sun beat down as he crested a rocky ridge, squinting at an unusual sight in the distance. A massive Belgian draft horse, coat slick with sweat, strained against the weight of an abandoned wagon. No driver held the reins. The animal moved with desperate determination, as if guided by some invisible hand. Gray Wolf approached cautiously, knife ready, hoping for supplies or weapons to aid his starving band. But what would cause a white settler to abandon such valuable property? What could be inside that wagon that would bring a hardened warrior to tears? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Gray Wolf approached the wagon with the caution of a man who had survived 3 decades in unforgiving land. His moccasins made no sound on the hard-packed earth. The massive Belgian draft horse, its coat the color of wet clay, snorted and pawed the ground as he neared. Its eyes, wide with exhaustion, regarded him warily. "Easy," Gray Wolf whispered in Apache, then switched to the few English words he knew. "Easy, horse." The animal's breathing steadied, perhaps recognizing the universal tone of gentleness that transcends language. Gray Wolf noticed the horse's ribs showing through its hide, once powerful, now weakened by days of strain and insufficient water. Gray Wolf circled toward the back of the canvas-covered wagon, his hunting knife ready. The scent reached him before he peered inside, the unmistakable smell of death beginning its work in the desert heat. He paused, listening for any movement, any trap. Only silence answered. Drawing aside the canvas flap, Gray Wolf squinted into the dimness. A woman lay inside, her skin pale as the moon, her golden hair spread across a blood-stained blanket. Her belly told the story. She had died bringing life into this world. Beside her lay a bundle wrapped in a shawl, impossibly small. Gray Wolf reached for the bundle, expecting another corpse, when a faint sound froze his hand. A whimper, barely perceptible, like the sound a rabbit kit makes when separated from its mother. He carefully unwrapped the shawl. The infant was red-faced and tiny, eyes screwed shut against the sudden intrusion of light. A miracle of survival in this merciless landscape. Gray Wolf's weathered face remained impassive, but something shifted beneath his ribs, a feeling he had buried alongside his family 3 winters past. A small wooden box rested beside the woman. Gray Wolf opened it cautiously, revealing a tarnished wedding band with a small, clouded stone. Beneath it lay a folded paper, sealed with wax. He broke the seal, unfolding the paper covered in the white man's writing, markings he could not decipher, but understood their importance. Gray Wolf surveyed the wagon's contents: sacks of cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, a rifle with ammunition, blankets, pots, and a water barrel, half full, provisions that would sustain his starving band for weeks. The infant whimpered again, louder now. The sound pulled at something within Gray Wolf, something he thought had withered away like grass in drought. He stood motionless, conflicted. His people were starving. 5 days he had hunted with nothing to show. This wagon held their survival. The child complicated matters. It was not of his blood, not of his people. It was the offspring of those who had driven the Apache from their lands, slaughtered their women and children without mercy. The infant's eyes opened, blue as the summer sky. They fixed upon Gray Wolf without fear, without judgment. He remembered his son, taken by fever while cavalry patrols prevented them from reaching healing springs. He remembered his wife, her body riddled with bullets as they fled their burning wickiup. All gone, all dust. The infant began to cry, a sound both foreign and achingly familiar. Gray Wolf reached into the wagon and lifted the child. It quieted almost immediately, tiny fingers curling around his calloused thumb with surprising strength. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Gray Wolf made a decision. He gathered the supplies, securing them to the wagon. He dug a shallow grave for the woman, placing the wedding band on her finger before covering her with earth and stones to protect her body from scavengers. He fashioned a sling from a piece of cloth to carry the infant against his chest. The child slept, unaware of the journey ahead or the warrior who had become its unlikely guardian. Grey Wolf took the horse's reins, guiding the animal toward the hidden valley where his small band waited. He would face their judgment. Their question would offer them the provisions, gifts of survival in a time of desperation. But the child was not a matter for negotiation. "You will live, little one," Grey Wolf said in Apache, as the wagon wheels creaked across the barren landscape. Whether this is wisdom or foolishness, only the spirits know. The wedding band gleamed briefly on the mother's buried finger as Grey Wolf led the horse away, a small tribute to a woman whose name he would never know, whose child now depended on the mercy of a man who had long ago forgotten how to be merciful. The last light of day painted the western sky crimson as Grey Wolf finished arranging stones over the woman's grave. The desert would soon grow cold, the way it always did when the sun retreated, as if punishing the earth for some ancient transgression. The infant slept in the makeshift sling across Grey Wolf's chest, its tiny body radiating heat like a small ember. He had fashioned a mixture of water and crushed cornmeal, feeding the child by dipping a clean cloth into the paste and letting the infant suckle it, an old method his grandmother had taught him when mothers could not produce milk. He stood over the grave, speaking words in Apache that the woman would never understand, but that the spirits might carry to whatever afterlife whites believed in. "Your journey is over," he said. "Your child's journey continues. This is all I can promise." From around his neck, Grey Wolf removed a deer bone whistle carved with symbols of protection. 3 winters it had hung there, made by his son's small hands in the time before soldiers came. He had not used it since that day, could not bear to hear its piercing call without his son to answer. He placed it atop the gravestones, a gesture that surprised even him. "Watch over your child from the spirit world," he told the woman. "I will watch over it in this." Grey Wolf returned to the wagon, checking the horse's condition. The animal needed rest, but could travel by morning. He prepared a small fire, just enough to warm food without sending a beacon of smoke into the twilight sky. As he ate a meager portion of the wagon's supplies, saving most for his starving band, memories crowded his mind like ravens on carrion. His son, Running Stream, had been 7 winters old, quick to laugh, quicker to learn the ways of tracking and hunt. His small fingers had worked the deer bone for days, hollowing it carefully with tools Grey Wolf had made him. The pride in his eyes when he presented the whistle to his father, a gift that meant more than all the rifles and horses a warrior might possess. His wife, Dawn Singer, whose voice had indeed been like the first birds greeting morning, her hands gentle when needed, strong when required. She who had stood over their son during the fever, refusing sleep or food, placing wet cloths on his burning skin. She who had carried him for 2 days, after he died, refusing to leave his body for coyotes, even as the cavalry pursued them. Grey Wolf looked down at the sleeping infant. White skin that would burn under the desert sun, blue eyes that would mark it as forever different from his people, small hands that had never known freedom or imprisonment, love or hate. "What am I to do with you?" he whispered. The practical choice was clear. Leave the child with its mother. Take the horse, the wagon, the supplies, return to his people with food, instead of another mouth to feed. The infant would not suffer long. The night would take it quickly, painlessly. But as the stars emerged in the darkening sky, Grey Wolf knew he could not leave the child to die alone in the desert night. He had vowed to protect his family. Perhaps the spirits had sent this strange opportunity as a test, or a chance for redemption, or simply as a cruel joke. The infant stirred, making small noises of hunger. Grey Wolf prepared more of the cornmeal mixture. "You have poor timing, little one," he said as he fed the child. "And you have chosen a poor protector. But we will reach my people tomorrow, and there are wiser ones than me who will know what to do." As the infant drifted back to sleep, Grey Wolf arranged the wagon's canvas to create shelter, against the night wind. Tomorrow would bring difficult decisions. Tomorrow he would face the judgment of his band, some who had lost even more than he had to the white man's expansion. But tonight, under stars that had witnessed the birth and death of nations, a warrior who had lost everything watched over a child who never should have lived. Grey Wolf closed his eyes but remained alert, listening to the desert's night sounds, the rustle of small creatures, the distant howl of coyotes, the whisper of wind through scrub brush, and beneath it all, the steady breathing of an infant who had somehow survived against impossible odds. Perhaps Grey Wolf thought as he drifted into a half-sleep, they were not so different after all. Dawn broke over the eastern mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Grey Wolf had been traveling since first light, leading the Belgian horse with its wagon of precious supply. The infant stirred against his chest, making small sounds of hunger. He paused to feed the child more of the cornmeal mixture before continuing their journey. The hidden valley, where his small band had made camp, lay a half-day's travel to the north, nestled between twin mesas that offered protection from both the elements and unwanted eyes. As he walked, Grey Wolf rehearsed what he would say to the council. 17 souls remained of what had once been a proud band of over 60. 17 hungry, hunted people who looked to him for guidance since the death of Chief Stone Bear. By midday, Grey Wolf spotted the thin tendrils of smoke rising from cooking fires, carefully controlled to disperse quickly. He gave a low whistle, mimicking a canyon wren. Moments later, the call was returned. They knew he was coming. Running Fox appeared first, rifle ready, dark eyes narrowing at the sight of the wagon. "You bring the white man's possessions," he said in Apache, neither a question nor a greeting. "I bring food for hungry bellies," Grey Wolf replied. "And news for the council." Running Fox's gaze dropped to the bundle strapped to Grey Wolf's chest. His expression hardened. "You bring more than that." Grey Wolf said nothing, leading the horse forward. More of the band emerged from their shelters, gaunt faces that had known too much hunger, too much loss. Children with eyes too old for their years stared at the wagon with cautious hope. White Feather, eldest of the women and keeper of their stories, approached slowly. Her face was a map of wrinkles earned through 80 winters of survival. She stopped before Grey Wolf, her eyes not on the wagon but on the bundle against his chest. "Show me," she commanded. Grey Wolf carefully unwrapped the infant. The child blinked in the harsh sunlight, its face scrunching in protest. Whispers spread through the gathered band. Some made signs to ward off evil. Others simply stared in disbelief. "A white child," White Feather stated. "You bring a white child to our camp when their soldiers hunt us like animals." "It would have died," Grey Wolf said. "Its mother passed into the spirit world, bringing it to life, and its father. Dead also, I believe. There was a wagon, supplies, but no man." White Feather held out her arms. After a moment's hesitation, Grey Wolf handed her the infant. Her ancient hands, gnarled like juniper roots, cradled the child with practiced ease. She examined it carefully, checking its limbs, its eyes, the soft spot on its head. "A boy," she announced. Strong, despite his journey. From the crowd stepped forward Tall Reed, mother of the band's youngest child, an infant girl of 3 moons. "I have milk enough for 2, she said quietly. "The council has not decided the child's fate," Running Fox objected. "The child will be fed until they do," White Feather said with the finality that not even Running Fox would challenge. Grey Wolf reached into the pocket of his buckskin shirt and withdrew a small object wrapped in rabbit fur. He carefully unwrapped it, revealing a clay pipe bowl in the shape of a buffalo, its surface darkened with years of ceremonial use. "I found this among the woman's possessions," he said, though this was not true. The pipe had belonged to Chief Stone Bear, given to Grey Wolf upon the old chief's death. Perhaps it was meant to be traded. Perhaps it was taken from our people. Either way, it has returned to us now. White Feather's eyes narrowed slightly, seeing through his deception, but she said nothing as the band murmured at this discovery. The return of a sacred object would be seen as a good omen by many. "Unload the wagon," Grey Wolf instructed the younger men. "Tall Reed will care for the infant until the council meets." Running Fox, gather the elders at sunset. As the band moved to follow his instructions, Grey Wolf stood alone, watching as Whitefeather carried the infant to Tall Reed's wickiup. He had bought the child time, perhaps only hours, with food and a manufactured sign. Tonight the council would demand truth, and he would have to provide it. The sun continued its arc across the sky, indifferent to the drama unfolding beneath it. Grey Wolf helped distribute the supplies, carefully rationing to ensure they would last. All the while the weight of the coming council pressed upon him like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Flames reached toward the darkening sky as the 7 remaining elders of the band gathered in a circle. The council fire cast long shadows across weathered faces that had witnessed the slow destruction of their way of life. Grey Wolf sat among them, his position earned through both bloodline and proven wisdom in battle. Whitefeather entered the circle last, carrying the infant wrapped in a rabbit-skin blanket. The child slept peacefully, belly full of Tall Reed's milk. She placed the bundle on a soft deerskin in the center of the circle, where all could see the subject of their deliberation. "We gather to decide the fate of this child," Blackhawk, the eldest male, began. His voice rasped like wind through dry grass. "Grey Wolf has brought a white infant into our band. We must determine if this brings blessing or curse upon our people." All eyes turned to Grey Wolf. "Spears," Blackhawk commanded. Grey Wolf recounted his discovery of the wagon, the dead mother, the surviving infant. He spoke of the supplies that would sustain them through the coming weeks. He did not speak of his own losses, his own reasons for saving the child. These were known to the white soldiers hunt for our scalps. Running Fox said when Grey Wolf had finished. They would hunt even harder for a child they believe we have stolen. "We did not steal it," Grey Wolf countered. "The spirits placed it in our path." "The spirits also place rattlesnakes in our path," Running Fox replied. "We do not pick them up and carry them home." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the circle. Whitefeather raised her hand for silence. From her medicine pouch, she withdrew a small object and held it to the firelight. It was a carved antler handle of a knife, intricate with symbols of the 4 winds. The blade was missing, broken off at the hilt. "This was found in the wagon," she said. "It is Apache work." Grey Wolf concealed his surprise. He had seen no such item in the wagon. Whitefeather must have placed it there herself after examining the supplies, or perhaps had kept it hidden for just such an occasion. Like him, she was weaving truth and fiction to influence the council. "The knife was traded to whites many seasons ago," she continued. "I recognize the markings of swift deer, who now hunts in the spirit lands. That it returns to us with this child is a sign." "A sign of what?" Running Fox demanded. "That is for us to interpret," Whitefeather replied calmly. "But I have lived 80 winters and have seen many signs. Sometimes the path that seems most dangerous leads to salvation." Spotted Elk, whose 3 sons had been killed by cavalry 2 seasons past, leaned forward. "The white man took my sons. Why should I raise one of theirs?" "Because you are Apache, not white man," Whitefeather answered simply. Silence fell over the circle. The fire crackled, sending sparks spiraling upward to join the stars. "There is another matter," Grey Wolf said finally. "The horse and wagon. They are too visible. We must decide what to do with them." "Trade them," Blackhawk suggested. "At the Mexican settlements to the south, for ammunition and blankets for the coming winter." "And the child?" Grey Wolf asked, bringing the discussion back to its purpose. "I say we return it to its own kind," Running Fox insisted. "Leave it at the edge of a settlement where it will be found. It would die before morning." Tall Reed spoke from outside the circle, where she stood listening. "It is too small, too weak for such a journey." "Then what would you have us do?" Running Fox challenged. "Keep it until it grows old enough to betray us to its people." "I would have us be who we are," Grey Wolf said, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. "We are Apache. We do not abandon the helpless to die. This was our way before the white man came. It should remain our way." The infant stirred, making small noises in its sleep. 7 pairs of eyes looked down at the bundle. "I propose this," Grey Wolf continued. We keep the child until the next full moon. If by then the signs show we should not keep it, I myself will take it to the settlement at San Carlos. And if soldiers come looking for it before then, Running Fox asked. Then we will know the spirits intended a different path, Grey Wolf answered. Black Hawk nodded slowly. This seems wise. We will watch for signs. Until the full moon the child remains with us. White Feather placed the broken knife handle beside the sleeping infant. The child needs a name, she said, until we know its true path. Grey Wolf looked up at the night sky, where the evening star shone brightly above the western horizon. Little star, he said quietly, for it came to us under the night sky. And so it was decided, for better or worse, the child would remain. 3 days passed in relative peace. The band feasted cautiously on the wagon's bounty, careful not to consume too much too quickly. The horse proved valuable, carrying burdens that would have otherwise fallen to the women. Little Star took well to Tall Reed's nursing, sharing her milk with her own daughter without complaint. Grey Wolf was skinning a rabbit he had caught when Tall Reed's panicked voice called his name. He dropped his knife and ran to her wickiup, finding her cradling Little Star, whose tiny face had turned an alarming shade of red. He burns with fever, she said, her eyes wide with fear. It came suddenly like a storm. Grey Wolf placed his palm on the infant's forehead. Heat radiated from the small body. Little Star's breathing came in rapid, shallow gasps, his tiny limbs trembling. White Feather, Grey Wolf called. We need White Feather. The old woman was already approaching. Drawn by Tall Reed's distress, she took the child in her arms, examining him with experienced eyes. His lungs fill with fluid, she pronounced. The journey was too much for one so small. Around them the band gathered, drawn by the commotion. Running Fox stood at the edge of the crowd, his expression unreadable. Is this a sign? Someone whispered. The spirits rejecting the child. Silence, White Feather commanded. Bring me my medicine pouch. Grey Wolf fetched the ancient leather bag that contained White Feather's healing herbs. She withdrew bundles of dried plants, sorting through them with practiced hands. We need a steam tent, she instructed, and water boiling with these herbs. The band moved quickly, erecting a small structure of bent willow covered with hide. Inside, stones heated in the fire would create steam to ease the child's breathing. As preparations continued, White Feather drew Grey Wolf aside. I have seen this sickness before, she said quietly. It took many of our children after we were forced from our ancestral land. The white child may not have the strength to survive it. Grey Wolf's jaw tightened. My son did not survive it. White Feather nodded, remembering. The fever must break by morning, or the child will join your son in the spirit land. Throughout the afternoon and into the evening, they worked tirelessly. White Feather created poultices and teas, applying her ancient knowledge to save the tiny life. Tall Reed sacrificed her sleep to hold the infant in the steam tent, singing soft lullabies when he cried. Grey Wolf alternated between helping and standing guard at the camp's perimeter. Each time the child's wails reached his ears, he remembered his son's final days, the helplessness, the rage, the bitter acceptance. Near midnight, as Little Star's condition worsened, Grey Wolf returned to the fire, where White Feather prepared another batch of medicine. To his surprise, Running Fox sat nearby, carving something from a piece of wood. Has the fever broken? Running Fox asked without looking up. No, Grey Wolf replied. It grows worse. Running Fox nodded, continuing his work. After a moment he held out the object he had been carving, a small wooden rattle in the shape of a turtle, filled with tiny pebbles that made a gentle sound when shaken. My grandmother made one for me when I was sick as a child, he said. The sound is said to drive away evil spirits. Grey Wolf accepted the offering with surprise. You would help save the white child? Running Fox met his gaze steadily. I would not see any child suffer, even one whose people have caused us such pain. That is what separates us from them. Grey Wolf nodded, a new understanding passing between the two warriors. The night deepened. The band maintained a vigil around the fire as White Feather and Tall Reed fought for Little Star's life. Grey Wolf sat outside the steam tent, shaking the turtle rattle in a steady rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Inside, White Feather chanted healing prayers over the whimpering infant. Dawn approached with agonizing slowness. Grey Wolf's arms ached from the repetitive motion, but he continued shaking the rattle, willing strength into the tiny body, fighting for each breath. As the first light touched the eastern horizon, Tall Reed emerged from the steam tent, tears streaming down her face. Grey Wolf's heart constricted, preparing for the worst. "The fever breaks," she whispered. "He sleeps peacefully now." A collective exhale seemed to pass through the gathering. Even Running Fox nodded in solemn acknowledgement. White Feather emerged last, her ancient face lined with exhaustion. "The child is stronger than he appears," she said. "Perhaps there is Apache spirit in him after all." Grey Wolf looked down at the turtle rattle in his hand, then at Running Fox, who had risen to return to his own shelter. "Thank you," Grey Wolf said simply. Running Fox paused. "I still believe the child brings danger," he replied. "But no child deserves to suffer. The council's decision stands until the full moon." As the camp slowly returned to its normal rhythms, Grey Wolf sat beside the sleeping infant, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. Little Star had survived his first trial. Grey Wolf suspected it would not be his last. 2 days after Little Star's fever broke, a scout returned with troubling news. Cavalry patrols had been spotted to the east, moving in a pattern that suggested they were searching the territory systematically. The council quickly decided it was time to move to their summer grounds in the high country. Before dawn, the camp disappeared as if it had never existed. The Apache were masters of swift, traceless movement, a skill honed through generations and perfected during years of persecution. The wagon had already been disassembled, its useful parts distributed among the band. The Belgian horse, now fitted with a blanket and rope bridle, carried bundles of supplies and the 2 infants secured in cradle boards. Grey Wolf led the procession, reading the land for signs of danger. Behind him came the horse, led by Tall Reed. The rest of the band followed in a line that left minimal tracks, with Running Fox bringing up the rear to obscure what traces they couldn't avoid leaving. The journey to the summer grounds would take 4 days if they moved quickly. 4 days of exposed travel through increasingly rugged terrain. 4 days for something to go wrong. By midday, the sun beat down mercilessly. Little Star, still weakened from his illness, began to cry in his cradleboard. Tall Reed tried to soothe him, but the child's wails echoed against the canyon walls. "Silence him," Running Fox hissed, catching up to them. "Sound carries in these canyons." "He is a baby," Tall Reed replied defensively. "He does not understand danger." "Then he must be taught," Running Fox said, reaching for his knife. Grey Wolf moved between them. "We stopped to rest," he announced. 1 hour, in the shadow of that overhang. The band gratefully took shelter in the meager shade. Tall Reed nursed both infants while others distributed small rations of water. Grey Wolf climbed to a vantage point, scanning their back trail for pursuers. Running Fox joined him, his expression grim. "The white child will be our undoing." "The child is not to blame for being born," Grey Wolf replied. "No, but he may be our death nonetheless." They resumed their journey as the afternoon heat began to wane. The trail grew steeper, winding through narrow passes where they had to proceed in single file. By sunset they had covered less ground than Grey Wolf had hoped. They made camp in a defensible position beneath a rock outcropping, eating cold food rather than risking a fire. As darkness fell, Grey Wolf took first watch. The stars emerged one by one, indifferent to the struggles below. Little Star slept peacefully now, having adjusted to the rhythm of travel. Grey Wolf found himself watching the rise and fall of the infant's chest, a habit formed during the fever. White Feather appeared beside him, her movement silent despite her age. "You grow attached to the white child," she observed. Grey Wolf did not deny it. "He fights to live, as we all do." White Feather nodded, From her medicine pouch, she withdrew a small object and handed it to Grey Wolf. It was a pair of tiny moccasins, smaller than the palm of his hand, crafted from the softest duskin and adorned with porcupine quills in a pattern of stars. "I made these for your son before he was born," she said. "I kept them all these years, thinking perhaps they might be needed again someday." Grey Wolf ran his thumb over the fine stitching. "You believe little Star is meant to stay with us. I believe the spirits have their own purposes, which we often fail to understand until much later." White Feather replied, "The moccasins are yours to do with as you choose." At dawn they continued their ascent. The terrain grew more challenging, but it was familiar to them. Ancestral lands where their people had summered for countless generations before the white man came. By midday they reached a stream that marked the halfway point to their destination. As the band stopped to refill water containers, Grey Wolf noticed dark clouds building over the western peaks. "Storm coming," he warned. "We must find shelter before it breaks." They quickened their pace, following the stream upward. The wind rose, carrying the scent of rain. Thunder rumbled in the distance, growing closer with each passing minute. The first heavy drops began to fall as they reached an outcropping of rock that formed a natural shelter. They huddled beneath it as the storm unleashed its fury, lightning splitting the sky and thunder shaking the ground beneath them. Little Star woke, frightened by the noise. Grey Wolf took him from his cradleboard, holding him close to calm his fears. The tiny body trembled against his chest. "You are safe, Little Star," he murmured, in Apache. "Thunder is just the sky spirits racing their horses above us." As if understanding, the child quieted, his blue eyes fixed on Grey Wolf's face, with a trust that pierced the warrior's carefully maintained distance. That night, as the band slept beneath the overhang, Grey Wolf placed the tiny moccasins beside Little Star. Tomorrow they would reach the high country. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, a white child dreamed beneath an Apache blanket, his feet warmed by moccasins meant for a son lost to time. Dawn broke with the promise of clear skies after the storm. The band moved efficiently, breaking camp and resuming their journey while dew still glistened on the sparse vegetation. Grey Wolf estimated they would reach the summer grounds by nightfall if they maintained their pace. They followed a narrow path that wound through a series of ravines. Though less direct, this route offered cover and water sources. Grey Wolf led the way, alert to any sign of danger. Little Star rode in his cradleboard on Grey Wolf's back now, a position that had developed naturally after the storm. The child seemed content there, rarely fussing even during difficult stretches of travel. Near midday, Grey Wolf froze. Raising his hand for the band to halt, he motioned for silence, then beckoned Running Fox forward. Together, they crept to the edge of a rise and peered down into the valley beyond. Cavalry, a patrol of 12 soldiers making camp by a stream, the same stream the Apache needed to cross to reach the summer ground. Their blue uniforms stood out against the earth tones of the landscape, as did the American flag. One soldier was attaching to a makeshift staff. Running Fox's expression darkened. "They block our path," Grey Wolf studied the soldier's position. "They have chosen well. They control the water and the crossing. We could backtrack, find another route. It would add 2 days to our journey. The children and elders would suffer." Running Fox's gaze shifted to the cradleboard on Grey Wolf's back. "And if they hear the white child cry? If they see him?" Grey Wolf had no answer for that. They returned to the waiting band and shared their discovery. Worried murmurs rippled through the group. Water was running low, and the detour would mean crossing a waterless stretch. "We wait until nightfall," Black Hawk suggested. "Cross when they sleep. They will post guards," Running Fox countered. "Then we must give them reason to move from their position," Grey Wolf said. Silence fell as all understood what he meant. Someone would need to draw the soldiers away, a dangerous task that might mean capture or death. "I will go," Grey Wolf decided. "I know these lands best." "And the white child?" Running Fox challenged. "You would take him with you?" Grey Wolf hesitated. The thought of separation from Little Star caused an unexpected pang. "I will care for him," Tall Reed offered quietly. "Until you return." Grey Wolf nodded his thanks. He removed the cradle board and carefully transferred Little Star to Tall Reed's arms. The infant stirred but did not wake. "Give me until sunset," Grey Wolf instructed. "If the soldiers move, cross quickly and continue to the summer grounds. I will find you, and if you do not return," Black Hawk asked what others dared not. Grey Wolf untied a small pouch from his belt. From it he withdrew a polished obsidian arrowhead, its edge still sharp despite its obvious age. "This was my father's, and his father's before him," he said, pressing it into Black Hawk's palm. "Keep it for Little Star. Tell him of our ways when he is old enough to understand." The admission that the white child might remain with them permanently hung in the air. No one challenged it in this moment of farewell. Grey Wolf took only his knife, a water skin, and his rifle with a handful of cartridges. He moved away from the band, circling wide to approach the cavalry from the east, making it appear he had come from that direction, not from where his people hid. He chose his position carefully, on a ridge that offered multiple escape routes. Taking aim at a tree near the soldiers' camp, he fired a single shot. The crack of the rifle echoed across the valley. Immediately the camp burst into activity. Soldiers grabbed weapons, mounted horses, shouted orders. Grey Wolf fired once more, then began his retreat, leaving clear tracks for the soldiers to follow. Behind him he heard the pounding of hooves as cavalry gave chase. What followed was a deadly game. Grey Wolf led the soldiers on a twisting route through the landscape, always staying just far enough ahead to avoid their bullets, close enough to keep them interested. He knew every rock and crevice of these hills, using the terrain to maintain his advantage over mounted pursuers. Hours passed. Grey Wolf led them farther and farther from the band's crossing point, deeper into a maze of canyons where horses struggled to maintain footing. The sun descended toward the western peaks. By now his people would be crossing the stream, continuing toward safety. As daylight waned, Grey Wolf prepared for his final deception. He led the pursuers to a canyon with multiple branches, leaving obvious signs down one path before doubling back and taking another. Night would conceal his escape while the soldiers wasted time pursuing a phantom. Exhausted but satisfied, Grey Wolf began the long journey to rejoin his band. He moved through darkness with the confidence of one born to these lands, navigating by stars and memory. His thoughts turned to Little Star. Had the child noticed his absence? Would he remember Grey Wolf when they were reunited? These concerns, so foreign to a warrior focused on survival, occupied his mind as he traveled through the night, driven by a new purpose that transcended mere duty to his people. 3 days passed before Grey Wolf found signs of his band. 3 days of cautious travel, avoiding open ground, subsisting on what little he could forage without taking time to hunt properly. His body, already lean from months of hardship, grew more gaunt, but his spirit remained strong, driven by purpose. He discovered their trail near a spring, subtle marks that others would miss but that spoke clearly to him of his people's passage. They had reached the summer grounds safely, following the ancient path to the high valley, nestled between protective. As Grey Wolf crested the final ridge, the familiar sight of wickiups among the pines greeted him. Smoke rose in thin spirals from cooking fires, quickly dispersing in the mountain air. Children gathered berries at the edge of the meadow. For a moment he stood watching this scene of ordinary life, a rare piece in their hunted existence. A sentry spotted him and raised a hand in greeting. Word spread quickly. By the time Grey Wolf reached the first wickiup, a small crowd had gathered. Faces showed relief, surprise, and from some suspicion. Running Fox stepped forward. "We thought the soldiers had taken you." "The soldiers found only shadows," Grey Wolf replied. His eyes scanned the gathering. "All arrived safely, all who left with us," Running Fox said pointedly. Before Grey Wolf could question this, Tall Reed emerged from her wickiup, Little Star cradled in her arms. The infant's face brightened at the sight of Grey Wolf, tiny arms reaching toward him in a gesture that pierced the warrior's heart. Grey Wolf crossed to them, taking Little Star from tall Reed. The child made sounds of contentment, his small hands clutching at Grey Wolf's leather shirt. "He has cried for you," tall Reed said softly, "as if he knew you were missing." Grey Wolf held the child close, inhaling his scent, reassuring himself that Little Star was well. Only after this moment did he look up to find many eyes watching their reunion with expressions ranging from warmth to discomfort. "The council wishes to speak with you," Black Hawk announced, breaking the silence. "When you have rested and eaten," Grey Wolf nodded, "I will come before sunset." He spent the afternoon reacquainting himself with the summer camp, Little Star accompanying him in a new cradleboard that tall Reed had fashioned. The high valley remained much as Grey Wolf remembered from previous summers, a place of relative plenty, with game in the forests, fish in the stream, and berries ripening in sunny clearings. Here for a brief season the band could live as their ancestors had before the coming of the white man. As the sun began its descent behind the western peaks, Grey Wolf made his way to the council circle. Black Hawk, White Feather, and the other elders waited. Running Fox sat among them, his face impassive. Little Star slept in his cradleboard, which Grey Wolf placed carefully beside him as he took his place in the circle. "We give thanks to the spirits for your safe return," Black Hawk began formally. "Your actions allowed us to reach the summer grounds without loss." Grey Wolf acknowledged this with a slight nod. However, Black Hawk continued, "Questions have been raised about the cavalry's presence on our path. Some believe it was not coincidence." Grey Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Speak plainly." Running Fox leaned forward. "The soldiers appeared too precisely on our route, as if they knew our destination." "You suggest an informant?" Grey Wolf's voice remained level, though anger stirred within him. "I suggest the white man searches more diligently for a missing white child than for Apache scalps," Running Fox replied. "Perhaps they know we have the child." Grey Wolf looked at each face in the circle. "You believe I would betray our people for a white infant?" "Not willingly," Running Fox said, "but your attachment to the child clouds your judgment." White Feather, who had been silent until now, reached into her medicine pouch and withdrew a small object. She held it up for all to see, a tarnished cavalry officer's insignia, its brass surface dull with age and wear. "This was found near where we crossed the stream," she said, "after the soldiers had gone and Grey Wolf had led them away." Running Fox nodded grimly. "They were searching for something specific." Grey Wolf studied the insignia. "This is old," he observed. "Not from the soldiers I encountered." "Perhaps," White Feather agreed. "Or perhaps not." Grey Wolf's gaze moved from the insignia to Little Star, still sleeping peacefully. "What are you suggesting?" "The full moon approaches," Black Hawk reminded him. "We agreed the child's fate would be decided then. Some believe we should not wait," Running Fox added. "The cavalry patrols increase. They search the mountains with purpose." Grey Wolf felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain evening. "The child stays with us until the full moon," he said firmly. "That was the council's decision." "Unless signs indicated otherwise," Running Fox countered. "This insignia may be such a sign." Silence fell over the circle. In the distance a nighthawk called, its voice echoing against the mountainsides. "3 days," White Feather said finally. 3 days until the full moon. Let us observe and listen for the spirit's guidance until then." Black Hawk nodded agreement. 3 days, but Grey Wolf, you must guard against the blindness of attachment. The safety of our people must come before one child, even one you have come to care for. The council dispersed as darkness settled over the valley. Grey Wolf remained seated, Little Star beside him, watching as stars appeared one by one in the deepening sky. The old insignia lay where White Feather had placed it, a small shadow in the fading light. 3 days until the full moon. 3 days to determine if Little Star would remain with the people who had saved him, or be returned to the world that had abandoned him. The summer grounds bustled with activity as the band settled into their seasonal patterns. Women collected berries and edible plants. Men hunted the abundant game, and children played with the relative freedom that the protected valley allowed. On the surface, life proceeded as it had for countless summers before, yet undercurrents of tension rippled through the community. Grey Wolf felt the subtle changes. Conversations quieted when he approached. Some avoided his gaze, while others watched him too intently. Little Star, growing stronger by the day, had become the center of a silent controversy that divided the band. 2 days after Grey Wolf's return, as afternoon shadows lengthened across the valley, Running Fox approached him. Grey Wolf was teaching 2 boys how to set snares, Little Star secured to his back in the cradle board. The council gathers after sunset, Running Fox announced without preamble. All adults of the band will attend. Grey Wolf straightened. I thought we had until the full moon. Events have changed, Running Fox replied. More soldiers were spotted in the foothills this morning. Grey Wolf's expression remained neutral, despite the alarm that flared within him. Our scouts are certain? 2 patrols, moving in a pattern. Running Fox's eyes shifted to Little Star. They searched for something specific. As darkness fell, the band assembled around the council fire. Unlike the formal circle of elders, this gathering included everyone old enough to have a voice. 24 souls formed a ring beneath the emerging stars, their faces illuminated by dancing flames. Grey Wolf sat with Little Star beside him. The infant was awake but quiet, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight as he watched the gathering with an alertness that seemed beyond his few weeks of life. Black Hawk opened the council with traditional words, acknowledging the ancestors and the spirits of the place. Then he addressed the matter at hand. We face a question that concerns all our futures, he said. The white child among us, murmurs rippled through the circle. We agreed to keep the child until the full moon. Black Hawk continued, but signs suggest danger approaches. Running Fox will speak of what our scouts have seen. Running Fox rose, his tall frame casting a long shadow. Cavalry patrols move through the mountains in increasing numbers. They follow patterns of search, not of hunting. 2 days ago, they were in the eastern foothills. Today, they move closer to our valley. They always hunt us in summer, one woman objected. This is not new. Their movements are different, Running Fox insisted. They search methodically, as if following a map. They examine each valley, each stream. For us or for the child, someone asked. Does it matter? Running Fox countered. Either way, they threaten our survival. Grey Wolf listened in silence, weighing each word. When Running Fox finished, Black Hawk turned to him. Grey Wolf, you brought the child to us. You have cared for him as your own. What say you to these concerns? Grey Wolf rose slowly, conscious of the many eyes upon him. I say that fear makes us see patterns where none exist. Soldiers have always searched these mountains. They will always search, with or without Little Star among us. But they search with greater purpose now, Running Fox argued. A white child would be valued beyond measure. They would send many soldiers for such a one. The child's mother died alone, Grey Wolf countered. There was no sign anyone searched for her or knew of her passing. Perhaps they search now because someone has told them. Running Fox's implication hung in the air. Before Grey Wolf could respond, White Feather stood. From her medicine pouch, she removed a faded photograph encased in a small metal frame. The firelight caught the tarnished surface as she held it up for all to see. This was found in the wagon, she said. I did not show it before, because I wished to understand its meaning first. Grey Wolf stared at the image, recognizing a younger version of the woman he had buried. Beside her stood a man in a cavalry officer's uniform. The child's father was a soldier, White Feather announced. This explains the cavalry's interest. They search for one of their own. A heavy silence fell over the gathering. The photograph passed from hand to hand, each person examining the faces of those who had created Little Star. The spirits have spoken clearly, Running Fox declared. The child brings the soldiers to us. He must be returned to them before they find our sanctuary. Grey Wolf felt a cold weight settle in his chest. The evidence seemed undeniable. Little Star's father had been cavalry, the very force that had hunted and killed Grey Wolf's family and people for generations. One day's journey to the south lies the fort at Clear Creek. Running Fox continued. I propose we leave the child where their patrols will find him. He will be returned to his father's people, and we will be free of this danger. And if his father is among those hunting us? Grey Wolf asked. What then? Then he will have what he seeks and leave our mountains. Running Fox replied simply. Voices rose from around the circle, some agreeing with Running Fox, others expressing uncertainty. The peaceful unity of the band fractured before Grey Wolf's eyes. Black Hawk raised his hands for silence. We will vote as the ancestors taught us. Each adult will speak their mind, and the majority will decide. As the voting began, Grey Wolf looked down at Little Star, who had finally dozed off despite the tension surrounding him. The infant slept peacefully, unaware that his fate hung in the balance, determined by those who had once been strangers, but who now held his future in their hands. The vote was 13-11. By the narrowest margin, the band decided to wait until the full moon before determining Little Star's fate. Grey Wolf had argued passionately, reminding them of Apache traditions of honor and the ancient belief that children were sacred regardless of their origin. His words had swayed just enough hearts to grant Little Star a brief reprieve, but Grey Wolf knew that sentiments could shift like wind-blown sand. The photograph had planted seeds of fear and suspicion too deep to be easily uprooted. He needed guidance beyond his own conflicted heart. At dawn, he approached Whitefeather outside her wickiup. I must seek a vision, he told her. The spirits must show me Little Star's true path. Whitefeather studied him with eyes clouded by age but sharp with wisdom. The vision quest is dangerous when the heart is already decided. You may see only what you wish to see. My heart is torn, Grey Wolf admitted, between duty to my people and a promise I made to a dying woman, and perhaps to myself. Whitefeather nodded slowly. Then perhaps the spirits will speak clearly. She glanced toward where Tall Reed sat with both infants. The child will be cared for in your absence. Grey Wolf had already spoken with Tall Reed, who had agreed to watch over Little Star. He had seen the sympathy in her eyes. She too had voted to keep the child, understanding better than most the bond that had formed between them. Before departing, Grey Wolf visited Little Star one last time. The infant was awake, kicking his legs against the soft deerskin wrappings. When Grey Wolf appeared in his field of vision, the child's face brightened with recognition. I go to find answers, Grey Wolf told him softly in Apache. Wait for me, Little Star. As if understanding, the infant reached up with one tiny hand. Grey Wolf allowed the small fingers to grasp his own for a moment before gently pulling away. He departed with only a water skin, a small pouch of sacred tobacco, and his knife. The vision quest required solitude and sacrifice. Comfort would only dull the senses and cloud the mind. Grey Wolf traveled higher into the mountains, climbing toward a place known to his people for generations as the Speaking Stones, a natural formation where the boundary between worlds grew thin. By midday he reached the site, a circle of standing stones surrounding a flat rock altar, perched on a mesa overlooking the valleys below. He purified himself according to tradition, using smoke from sacred plants and prayers spoken to the 6 directions. Then he placed a pinch of tobacco at the base of each standing stone as an offering to the ancestors and spirits who might guide him. As the sun began its descent, Grey Wolf sat cross-legged on the stone altar. He would remain there without food or water until visions came, or until his strength failed. Night would bring cold at this altitude, but physical discomfort was part of the path to spiritual clarity. Shadows lengthened across the stone circle. Grey Wolf emptied his mind of conscious course, allowing his breathing to settle into a rhythm that matched the gentle wind. The sounds of the mountain birds calling, insects humming, leaves rustling flowed around and through him. Night arrived with a blanket of stars, so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Grey Wolf remained motionless, his body growing stiff and cold, but his awareness expanding outward. Hours passed. The moon rose, nearly full now, a pale witness to his vigil. Near midnight, Grey Wolf became aware of movement at the edge of the stone circle. A small kit fox approached, its eyes reflecting moonlight. Such animals normally avoided humans, yet this one came directly to Grey Wolf and sat before him, watching with unnatural intensity. In Apache tradition, the fox was a messenger between worlds, a guide for lost souls. Grey Wolf held its gaze, understanding that his vision had begun. The fox rose and circled him 3 times before leaving the stone altar. It paused at the edge of the circle, looking back as if expecting Grey Wolf to follow. When he rose to do so, his body felt light, disconnected from earth. The fox led him along a path that hadn't been there before, winding through forests and across streams that Grey Wolf recognized from his past. He saw his childhood wickiup, his mother grinding corn, his father returning from a hunt. He saw himself as a young warrior, courting the woman who would become his wife. Then the scenes changed. He witnessed the cavalry attack that had claimed his family, but this time he was both participant and observer, feeling the pain yet seeing the events with new perspective. He watched soldiers act with both cruelty and confusion, some driving the slaughter, others participating with reluctance, born of their own fear. The fox stopped beside a stream. In the water's reflection, Grey Wolf saw not his own face but that of Little Star, grown now to a young man who walked between 2 worlds. The vision showed this adult Little Star speaking with white leaders, then with Apache elders, his words building bridges where only chasms had existed before. The fox dipped its paw into the water, disturbing the image. When the ripple settled, the reflection changed to Grey Wolf himself, but older, teaching a teenage Little Star to track game through forest paths. As dawn approached, Grey Wolf found himself back on the stone altar, his body stiff from the night's cold. The fox was gone, but at his feet lay a single fox tooth, gleaming in the first light of morning. Grey Wolf picked up the tooth, turning it over in his palm. The vision's message seemed clear. Little Star's path was intertwined with his own. The child who had begun as a burden had been sent by the spirits as both test and gift. Perhaps even as the sun, his heart had never stopped mourning. As the sun crested the eastern mountains, Grey Wolf began his descent back to the summer grounds. The fox tooth secured in his medicine pouch, he carried with him the certainty of his vision and the strength to defend what his heart now knew to be true. Grey Wolf returned to the summer grounds by midday, the fox tooth secured in his medicine pouch against his chest. The camp was unusually quiet as he approached. Several people nodded in greeting, their expressions suggesting that important events had transpired in his absence. Black Hawk met him at the edge of the camp. "The council awaits your return," the elder said without preamble. "Running Fox has brought news." In the council circle, faces turned toward Grey Wolf as he took his place. He immediately looked for Little Star and found him in tall Reed's arms, sleeping peacefully. Relief washed through him. Running Fox stood in the center of the circle, dressed for travel, his rifle slung across his back. "3 more cavalry patrols have been spotted," he announced. "They establish a camp in the valley to the south. At least 20 soldiers, with more arriving." Murmurs of concern rippled through the gathered band. They prepare for a larger search. Running Fox continued. "Soon they will find our valley." "What do you propose?" Black Hawk asked, though Grey Wolf suspected the question was merely formality. A plan had already been formed. "We need supplies for the coming winter," Running Fox replied. "Ammunition, salt, cloth. I propose we take the Belgian horse to the trading post at 3 Rivers. We can exchange it for what we need and gather information about the soldiers' intentions." Grey Wolf considered this. The trading post was run by a Mexican named Vasquez, who dealt fairly with the Apache when it suited him. It was a 2-day journey through exposed country, but the need for supplies was real. "Who will go?" Grey Wolf asked. "I will lead," Running Fox replied, "with Swift Knife and yourself if you are willing." Grey Wolf concealed his surprise at being included. Was this an olive branch from Running Fox? Or did he have other motives? The three strongest warriors. Black Hawk nodded approval. But what of the child while Grey Wolf is gone? Tall Reed will continue to care for him, White Feather said from her place in the circle. As she has done before. Decision made, preparations began immediately. The trading party would depart at dawn, hoping to reach 3 Rivers by the following sunset, conduct their business and return within 4 days. That evening Grey Wolf sat outside his wickiup, Little Star cradled in his arms. The infant was alert, his blue eyes fixing on Grey Wolf's face with what seemed like recognition and trust. Grey Wolf spoke to him softly in Apache, explaining his coming absence, promising to return. "Guard your spirit while I am gone, Little Star," he murmured. "I have seen your path. It lies with us, with me, though others may not yet understand." At dawn, the 3 warriors prepared to depart. The Belgian horse, now recovered from its ordeal pulling the wagon, would serve as both transportation for their trade goods and their primary item of barter. Such a horse would fetch a high price at the trading post. Enough for ammunition, salt, coffee, and perhaps even cloth for winter garments. Grey Wolf bid farewell to Little Star, leaving him in Tall Reed's capable hands. The infant fussed slightly as if sensing the separation to come. Grey Wolf touched his forehead to the child's in a gesture of connection, before turning to join the waiting warriors. The journey to 3 Rivers passed without incident. They traveled cautiously, avoiding open ground, alert for signs of cavalry. By dusk of the 2nd day, they sighted the trading post, a sturdy adobe building surrounded by a wooden palisade, nestled in a valley where 3 small rivers joined to form a larger one. They approached after sunset, when fear eyes would mark their arrival. Vasquez greeted them warily but not with hostility. Business was business, regardless of troubles between Apache and the U.S. government. 3 Apache warriors far from their mountains, Vasquez remarked in Spanish, which Grey Wolf understood partially. "The army will pay for information about your people, and we pay for information about the army," Running Fox replied, in the same language. Along with other goods, Vasquez's eyes widened at the sight of the Belgian draft horse. "A fine animal, worth much. Enough for what we need and information too," Running Fox said. Inside the trading post, they conducted their business by lamplight. Vasquez drove a hard bargain, but eventually agreed to trade the horse for ammunition, supplies, and information. A swift knife loaded their acquisitions. Vasquez leaned close to Running Fox and Grey Wolf. "The cavalry searches for a woman and child," he said quietly. "A captain's wife, who left the fort 2 months ago. She was with child and disappeared. They offer much gold for information." Grey Wolf's face revealed nothing, but his pulse quickened. Little Star's mother had been the wife of a cavalry officer, just as the photograph had suggested. "Why would we know of white women?" Running Fox asked. Vasquez shrugged. "They search every settlement, every ranch. They believe she tried to reach family in California, but never arrived." He hesitated, then reached beneath the counter and produced a wanted poster. On it was a sketch of the woman Grey Wolf had buried, along with the words "missing" and "reward" in large letters. "They distribute these everywhere," Vasquez continued. "They say her name was Elizabeth Carter, wife of Captain James Carter. He leads the search himself." Running Fox took the poster, studying it briefly before folding it and tucking it into his shirt. "We have not seen this woman," he said firmly. As they prepared to depart, Grey Wolf noticed how Running Fox watched him, gauging his reaction to this news. The revelation confirmed what the photograph had suggested. Little Star was the son of a cavalry captain, a man who now led soldiers in scouring the mountains. Under cover of darkness, the 3 warriors left the trading post, their packs filled with supplies, but their hearts heavy with the knowledge that the danger to their band was even greater than they had feared. Captain Carter would not abandon his search for his wife and child, and when he learned his wife was dead and his son in Apache hands, his fury would know no bounds. The return journey from the trading post was tense and silent. Grey Wolf felt Running Fox's eyes on him frequently, watching for any sign of where his loyalties might lie now that they knew Little Star's true identity. Swift Knife, younger and less involved in the band's politics, focused on scouting their path and ensuring they avoided cavalry patrol. They traveled by night and hid during daylight, a more cautious approach than their journey to Three Rivers had been. The supplies they carried, ammunition, salt, coffee, tobacco and a bolt of sturdy cloth, were precious resources for the coming winter. But Grey Wolf knew the information they'd obtained was far more valuable than any material goods. As they neared the summer grounds on the third night, Running Fox finally broke his silence. "You buried the cavalry captain's wife," he said, not a question but a statement. Grey Wolf nodded. "I did not know who she was. And now that you know, her child is the son of a man who has hunted our people for years. A man who even now leads soldiers to find us." Grey Wolf met Running Fox's gaze steadily. "The son is not the father. Little Star has no more chosen his parentage than you or I chose ours." Running Fox shook his head. "You speak as if the child were Apache." "He could be," Grey Wolf replied, "if we raise him as such, and when he grows to look more like his father, with each passing year, when his skin remains pale and his eyes blue, what then?" Grey Wolf had no answer that would satisfy Running Fox. His vision at the Speaking Stones had shown him Little Star's future, a bridge between two worlds. But such visions were personal, not evidence he could present to skeptics. They reached the summer grounds before dawn. The camp was stirring early, people already moving about their daily tasks with purpose. Grey Wolf immediately sensed a shift in the atmosphere, a lightness that hadn't been present when they'd left. Black Hawk and White Feather greeted the returning traders, examining the supplies with approval. Other band members gathered around, eager to see what had been obtained in exchange for the Belgian horse. "The trading went well," Running Fox reported. "But we learned troubling news." He produced the wanted poster, explaining what Vasquez had told them about Captain Carter's search for his wife and child. The revelation sent ripples of concern through the gathered Apache. "This confirms our fears," Black Hawk said gravely. "The child brings the cavalry's focused attention." Grey Wolf's eyes searched the gathering, looking for Tall Reed and Little Star. He found them near the edge of the circle, the infant secured in a new cradleboard that Grey Wolf had not seen before. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with intricate beadwork depicting stars and protective symbols around its frame. Seeing his gaze, White Feather approached. "I made it while you were gone," she said. "The old women say a child should have a cradleboard made specifically for him, with symbols of protection and guidance." Grey Wolf was stunned by this development. "You made this for Little Star, knowing who his father is." White Feather's wrinkled face creased with a smile. "I began it before you left for your vision quest. I finished it after you departed for the trading post." She placed a gnarled hand on his arm. "The spirit spoke to me as well, Grey Wolf. The child has a purpose among us." Relief washed through him. He had returned expecting to fight once more for Little Star's place in the band. Instead, he found that at least some minds had shifted in his absence. As the gathering dispersed to examine and distribute the traded goods, Grey Wolf made his way to Tall Reed and Little Star. The infant was awake, kicking contentedly in his new cradleboard. At the sight of Grey Wolf, his tiny face brightened with recognition. "He missed you," Tall Reed said simply. He would not settle easily at night. Grey Wolf carefully lifted the cradleboard, examining White Feather's craftsmanship. The beadwork told a story of protection and belonging. Such a gift was not made lightly. It represented an acceptance of Little Star into the band regardless of his origin. "Much has changed while you were away," Tall Reed continued, lowering her voice. 2 nights ago, Stone Thrower's son fell into the stream and would have drowned. Little Star cried out just as it happened, though he could not have seen it from where we sat. His cries alerted those nearby, who pulled the boy from the water. Grey Wolf raised an eyebrow. "Coincidence, perhaps." "Perhaps," Tall Reed agreed. "But many now say the child has medicine power, that he was sent to us for a purpose." Grey Wolf glanced toward Running Fox, who stood with Black Hawk, clearly recounting more details from their trading post visit. Not everyone is convinced. No, Tolreed acknowledged. But more than before, the council meets tonight to make the final decision. The full moon rises. Grey Wolf nodded, his hand resting lightly on Little Star's new cradle board. The time had come for the band to choose, and for Grey Wolf to decide how far he would go to keep his promise to a dying woman and to the child who had somehow worked his way into the warrior's heart. "Tonight then," he said, lifting his face to the sky where the waning day would soon give way to the full moon's judgment. "We will see what path the spirits have chosen." The full moon rose like a silent witness over the council gathering. The band assembled beneath its pale light, faces solemn as they prepared to decide Little Star's fate once and for all. Grey Wolf sat with the child beside him, the new cradle board resting on a blanket of rabbit fur. Black Hawk had just risen to open the proceedings when a sentry's warning call split the night. "Soldiers, from the southern ridge." The peaceful moment shattered into chaos. Warriors grabbed weapons, mothers snatched up children, elders moved with surprising speed toward predetermined escape routes. Grey Wolf's hand went instantly to Little Star, securing the cradle board to his back as he reached for his rifle. How many? Running Fox demanded of the breathless sentry. "At least 30, maybe more, mounted, moving fast." Grey Wolf's mind raced. 30 mounted soldiers could only mean one thing. Captain Carter had somehow discovered their location. This was no random patrol, but a targeted raid. "They must have followed us from the trading post," Swift Knife said, voicing Grey Wolf's fear. "No time for blame," Black Hawk commanded. "Execute the escape plan. Warriors, delay them while the others reach the northern caves." The band's survival had always depended on preparation. 3 hidden paths led away from their summer grounds, and every member knew which to take and where to regroup. Grey Wolf moved to join the warriors who would cover the escape, but White Feather blocked his path. "Not you," she said firmly. "You must take Little Star. The captain will recognize his son." Torn between his duty as a warrior and his responsibility to Little Star, Grey Wolf hesitated. Running Fox approached, rifle in hand. "Go," he ordered. "If they capture the child, they will have what they seek. Perhaps then they will leave our people in peace." The implication was clear. Running Fox saw this as an opportunity to be rid of both Little Star and the pursuit he had brought upon them. Grey Wolf's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. The safety of the band came first, and if the soldiers captured him and Little Star, the others might indeed escape. "I will lead them away from the northern caves," Grey Wolf decided. The sound of approaching hoofbeats grew louder. There was no more time for discussion. Grey Wolf slipped away from the camp, moving west rather than north, perpendicular to both the soldiers' approach and the band's escape route. Behind him, rifle fire erupted as the warriors engaged the cavalry. Grey Wolf moved swiftly through familiar terrain, Little Star secured tightly against his back. The child, perhaps sensing danger, remained remarkably quiet. Grey Wolf reached a rocky slope that would be difficult for horses to navigate. As he began to climb, a shout went up. He had been spotted. 2 soldiers broke away from the main group, urging their mounts toward his position. Reaching a defensible outcropping, Grey Wolf carefully set Little Star's cradle board in a protected nook before taking up his rifle. He fired once, hitting the lead soldier's horse. The animal went down, throwing its rider. The second soldier dismounted, taking cover behind a boulder. "We know you have the child," the soldier shouted in English. "Captain Carter's son." Grey Wolf remained silent, conserving ammunition. In the distance, the sounds of battle at the camp continued, short bursts of gunfire punctuated by war cries and shouted orders. The fallen soldier dragged himself behind a rock, clutching a bleeding leg. His companion fired several shots that ricocheted harmlessly off the rocks, near Grey Wolf's position. "The captain offers terms," the second soldier called out. "Surrender the child unharmed, and your people will not be pursued." Grey Wolf's lip curled at the familiar lie. How many times had whites made promises only to break them as soon as it suited their purposes? He responded with another rifle shot that sent the soldier diving for cover. A cry from behind startled Grey Wolf. Little Star had awakened and begun to wail, his small voice echoing against the rocks. The soldiers immediately focused their attention on the sound. "It's the captain's son," one shouted. "Up there." More soldiers appeared, drawn by the commotion. Grey Wolf realized he would soon be surrounded. He slung his rifle across his back, gathered Little Star's cradle board, and continued climbing higher into the rocks, seeking a path that would be impassable to pursuing soldiers on foot. A bullet splintered stone inches from his head. Grey Wolf ducked instinctively, sheltering Little Star with his body. The child continued to cry, his wails now mixed with the shouts of soldiers and the distant sounds of battle from the camp. Reaching the crest of the rocky slope, Grey Wolf paused to catch his breath and check on Little Star. The infant was red-faced, but unharmed. Around his neck, Grey Wolf noticed something that hadn't been there before. A small silver crucifix on a thin chain, tucked partially inside the child's wrappings. Someone, perhaps White Feather or Tall Reed, had placed the Christian symbol on Little Star, either for protection or as a marker of his heritage. Grey Wolf touched it briefly, recognizing it as an object from the white man's world, a world that now hunted them with desperate determination. Making a swift decision, Grey Wolf removed the crucifix and placed it on a prominent rock. If the soldiers found it, they would know they were on the right trail. But by then, Grey Wolf intended to be far away, having led them on a false path, while the band escaped in another direction. Little Star quieted as Grey Wolf resumed their flight, tiny hands clutching at the warrior's braids, as if sensing that everything depended on their bond. Behind them, soldiers scrambled up the slope, driven by a father's desperation to find his son. Grey Wolf whispered a prayer to the spirits of his ancestors as he vanished into the darkness beyond the ridge, carrying with him the child who had become so much more than a duty, a child who now represented both their greatest vulnerability and perhaps their only hope for the future. 3 days of desperate flight through the high country had left Grey Wolf exhausted. He had successfully led the pursuing soldiers on a twisting path away from the band's escape route before finally losing them in a maze of canyons. Now he and Little Star were alone, making their way north toward the rendezvous point where, if fortune favored them, the scattered band would reassemble. The weather had turned against them. Though only early autumn, the mountains had their own seasons, and snow flurries had begun to dust the higher elevations. Grey Wolf felt the bitter cold seeping through his buckskin clothing as evening approached. More concerning was Little Star, whose small body had less resistance to the dropping temperatures. He knocked twice, then once more, a pattern bear killer would recognize as Apache. The door opened to reveal a mountain of a man, white-bearded and weather-beaten, a rifle held casually but ready in his gnarled hands. "Grey Wolf," the trapper acknowledged in his gravelly voice. His eyes went immediately to the bundle in the warrior's arms. "You bring company. He is sick," Grey Wolf said simply in his limited English. "Need help." Bear Killer's bushy eyebrows rose, but he stepped aside to allow entry. The cabin's interior was warm and smelled of tobacco, animal hides, and stew simmering on the iron stove. Grey Wolf felt some of the tension leave his body at the blessed warmth. "Let's see the little one," Bear Killer said, setting his rifle aside and gesturing toward a rough-hewn table. Grey Wolf carefully unwrapped Little Star from his cradleboard. The infant's face was flushed with fever, his breathing shallow and rapid. Bear Killer leaned close, his weathered face creasing with concern. "Lung sickness," he pronounced. "Bad for one so small." He looked up at Grey Wolf. "This ain't no Apache child. He is mine now," Grey Wolf replied firmly. Bear Killer asked no further questions. He moved to a shelf lined with bottles and jars, selecting several before returning to the table. From a trunk in the corner, he retrieved a small object and handed it to Grey Wolf. It was a child's wooden top, hand-carved and painted with simple designs. The colors had faded with age, and the wood was smooth from years of handling. "My son's," Bear Killer explained gruffly. "Long time ago, before the fever took him and his mother." Grey Wolf understood then why the trapper had allowed them entry without hesitation. The shared experience of loss created a bridge between them that transcended the usual barriers of race and history. Bear Killer mixed herbs with water and honey, creating a concoction that he carefully spooned into Little Star's mouth. "Get this down him every 2 hours," he instructed. "Keep him warm. The fever must break by morning." Grey Wolf nodded his gratitude, the wooden top still clutched in his hand. Outside, snow began to fall in earnest, the first serious storm of the approaching winter. They were temporarily safe, but Grey Wolf knew their reprieve would be brief. Captain Carter would not abandon his search, and the band would be missing Grey Wolf at the rendezvous point. As Little Star finally drifted into a more peaceful sleep under Bear Killer's medicine, Grey Wolf stood at the cabin's single window, watching the falling snow gradually erase their tracks. Winter was coming early to the mountains. For Grey Wolf and Little Star, it promised to be a season of both peril and possibility if they survived the night. For 3 days, Grey Wolf and Little Star sheltered in Bear Killer's cabin while the snowstorm raged outside. The trapper's medicine helped break the infant's fever, but the cough persisted, deep and rattling. Bear Killer's weathered face grew increasingly concerned as he listened to the child's labored breathing. "He needs stronger medicine than mine," the trapper admitted on the 3rd evening, as they sat before the fire. "Needs a real healer." Grey Wolf nodded, having reached the same conclusion. "My people have scattered. White Feather, our medicine woman, could be anywhere in the mountains." Bear Killer stroked his beard thoughtfully. "There's another, Black Crow, medicine man from the Chiricahua bands. Powerful healer, they say. Has a winter camp, 2 days' journey east of here." Grey Wolf knew of Black Crow by reputation, a shaman whose powers were respected even by rival bands. But the Chiricahua were not always friendly to Grey Wolf's people, and approaching their camp with a white child would be dangerous. "Black Crow might help," Bear Killer continued, as if reading Grey Wolf's thoughts. "Or he might not. But the little one won't last the winter without better medicine." That night, Grey Wolf made his decision. They would leave at dawn for Black Crow's camp. Bear Killer provided them with supplies, dried meat, a small pouch of herbs for Little Star, and a crudely drawn map to the Chiricahua winter camp. "The storm has passed," the trapper said as they prepared to depart. "But the soldiers will be searching again. Travel careful." Grey Wolf clasped the old man's arm in gratitude. "If my path brings me this way again, I will repay your kindness." Bear Killer shook his head. "Just keep the boy alive, that's payment enough." The journey east was arduous. Fresh snow blanketed the landscape, beautiful but treacherous. Grey Wolf fashioned rough snowshoes from pine branches and rawhide strips, making steady if slow progress. Little Star rode in his cradleboard, bundled against the cold with an extra rabbit fur blanket Bear Killer had provided. The child's condition neither improved nor worsened during their travel, but Grey Wolf could hear the fluid in his tiny lungs with each labored breath. Time was working against them. Near dusk on the 2nd day, Grey Wolf spotted smoke rising from a protected valley, thin, controlled plumes that marked an Apache camp. He approached cautiously, aware that he was entering another band's territory without invitation. Sentries spotted him while he was still at a distance. 3 warriors materialized from the snowy landscape, rifles aimed at Grey Wolf's chest. "I seek Black Crow," Grey Wolf announced in Apache, keeping his hands visible. For the child, the warriors' eyes moved to the cradleboard on Grey Wolf's back. Their expressions hardened at the sight of Little Star's pale skin and blue eyes. "You bring a white child to our camp?" one demanded. "When bluecoats hunt our people through the mountains, I bring a sick child to your medicine man," Grey Wolf corrected. "The rest can be explained to Black Crow." After a tense consultation, the warriors escorted Grey Wolf into their camp. Unlike his band's summer grounds, this was a winter settlement built for endurance. Sturdy wickiups arranged in a defensive circle, with food stores carefully protected from weather and predators. The Chiricahua regarded Grey Wolf with suspicion as he passed through their camp. Children stared openly at the strange warrior carrying a white infant. Women whispered behind their hands. Grey Wolf kept his gaze forward, his back straight with dignity despite his exhaustion. They brought him to a large wickiup set slightly apart from the other. Smoke escaped from a hole in its center, and the entrance was decorated with eagle feathers and animal skulls, signs of a powerful medicine man's dwelling. "Wait here," one warrior instructed before ducking inside. Moments later, the entrance flap opened, and a tall, gaunt man emerged. Black Crow was older than Grey Wolf had expected, perhaps 60 winters, but he moved with the fluid grace of a much younger man. His face was deeply lined, his eyes dark and penetrating beneath bushy white brows. Around his neck hung numerous medicine pouches and talismans. "You are far from your people, Mountain Apache," Black Crow observed, his voice surprisingly soft. "And you carry an unusual burden." Grey Wolf met the medicine man's gaze directly. "The child is sick. Bear Killer's medicine helped the fever, but not the cough. He says the child will not survive the winter without stronger healing." Black Crow's eyes narrowed. "And why does an Apache warrior care whether a white infant lives or dies? He was placed in my path by the spirits." Grey Wolf replied simply, "I buried his mother. I have protected him since. He is mine now." The medicine man regarded Grey Wolf silently for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes shifted to Little Star, studying the child with clinical detachment. Finally, he reached into one of his medicine pouches and withdrew a small object. It was a carved stone bear, no larger than a man's thumb, fashioned from green soapstone. Black Crow held it toward Grey Wolf. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Grey Wolf recognized it immediately. "A spirit token, for guidance in difficult journeys." Black Crow nodded. "My grandfather gave this to me when I began my training as a medicine man. He said it would help me find my way when the path was unclear." He closed his hand around the stone bear. "Why have you really brought this child to me?" Grey Wolf hesitated, then spoke the truth that had been growing in his heart. "Because I believe he has a purpose among our people. I have seen it in a vision at the Speaking Stones." "Visions can be misinterpreted," Black Crow warned, "especially when the heart is involved. That is why I seek your wisdom," Grey Wolf acknowledged. "To see beyond my own desires." Black Crow's stern expression softened slightly. He gestured toward his wickiup. "Bring the child inside. I will examine him. Then we will speak of visions and purposes." As Grey Wolf ducked into the medicine man's dwelling, he felt a cautious hope stir within him. Whether Black Crow would heal Little Star remained uncertain, but at least he had not been turned away. For now, that would have to be enough. 7 days passed in the Charikawa camp, 7 days of healing ceremonies, herbal remedies, and anxious waiting as Black Crow fought to save Little Star's life. The medicine man worked tirelessly, employing ancient knowledge passed down through generations of healers. Grey Wolf assisted as needed, learning the preparation of medicines and participating in the sacred rituals. By the 7th day, Little Star's breathing had eased. The terrible cough subsided, and color returned to his pale cheek. He began to take nourishment eagerly from a young Chiricahua mother who had recently lost her own infant and still had milk to offer. Grey Wolf felt profound gratitude as he watched Little Star strengthen day by day, but his relief was tempered by the knowledge that their problems were far from over. Though the Chiricahua had tolerated their presence thus far, many remained suspicious of the white child and the trouble he might bring upon them. On the evening of the 7th day, Black Crow summoned Grey Wolf to his wickiup. The medicine man sat cross-legged before a small fire, his face grave in the flickering light. Beside him lay a deerskin map of the territory, marked with charcoal symbol. "The child will live," Black Crow stated without preamble. "His body has found its strength again. Thanks to your medicine," Grey Wolf acknowledged. Black Crow nodded slightly, accepting the gratitude. "But now you face a different kind of sickness, one I cannot heal with herbs or ceremony." Grey Wolf waited, sensing the medicine man had more to say. "Last night, I sought guidance from the ancestors," Black Crow continued. They showed me many paths, but all led to the same truth. He paused, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. The white child cannot remain among the Apache. Though Grey Wolf had feared this conclusion, hearing it spoken aloud sent a jolt of pain through his chest. He has no one else. He has a father who searches for him, Black Crow countered. A father who leads soldiers through our mountains, disrupting the harmony of all Apache bands. Captain Carter will never stop searching, Grey Wolf agreed reluctantly. And as long as he searches, our people will find no peace. Black Crow gestured to the map. Already, the soldiers establish winter camps in valleys where we once hunted freely. They question traders, threaten Mexican settlements, offer rewards for information. This spring, they will come in greater numbers. Grey Wolf stared into the fire, absorbing the harsh reality of their situation. What would you have me do? Return the child to his people, Black Crow said simply. End the hunt before it consumes us all. His people killed my family, Grey Wolf replied, an edge of bitterness creeping into his voice. They hunt us like animals. Why should I show them mercy? Not for them, Black Crow said. For us. For the child. Even for yourself. He leaned forward. I have watched you with the boy. Your spirit has begun to heal through caring for him. But keeping him among us will only bring more death, perhaps even his own. Grey Wolf could not deny the truth in the medicine man's words. The vision at the speaking stones had shown Little Star as a bridge between worlds, but perhaps that bridge could not be built in the way Grey Wolf had imagined. There is a trading post near Fort Bowie, Black Crow continued, pointing to a location on the map. 3 days' journey south. The trader there, Gonzalez, is no friend to the Bluecoats. He would ensure the child reaches his father without revealing who delivered him. And if I refuse, Grey Wolf asked, though he already knew the answer. Then you must leave our camp, Black Crow replied with regret. And your own band may not welcome you back with the child. You would face the winter alone, hunted by both Bluecoats and hunger. That night, Grey Wolf kept vigil beside Little Star, watching the infant's peaceful sleep. The child had grown in the weeks since Grey Wolf had found him in the abandoned wagon. His face had filled out, losing some of its newborn appearance. Sometimes, when he looked at Grey Wolf, there seemed to be recognition in his blue eyes, perhaps even affection. What is best for you, Little Star? Grey Wolf whispered. Not for me, not for the Apache, not for your father, but for you. At dawn, Grey Wolf made his decision. He would take Little Star to the trading post near Fort Bowie, not because Black Crow demanded it, nor because he feared wintering alone, but because he had come to love the child enough to place Little Star's future above his own desires. Black Crow provided supplies for the journey, food, medicines for Little Star, and detailed instructions for avoiding cavalry patrols. As Grey Wolf prepared to depart, the medicine man presented him with a final gift, a beaded medicine pouch decorated with symbols of protection and safe passage. For the child, Black Crow explained, a reminder of who first gave him life when death seemed certain. Grey Wolf accepted the pouch, touched by the unexpected gesture. You believe the spirits have a purpose for him after all? The spirits have a purpose for all things, Black Crow replied cryptically. Even those we cannot understand. The Chiriquitua gathered to witness their departure. Though many still regarded Little Star with suspicion, they honored Grey Wolf's devotion with respectful silence. The young mother who had nursed Little Star wept quietly, pressing a small bundle of dried berries into Grey Wolf's hand. As Grey Wolf left the Chiriquitua camp with Little Star secured in his cradleboard, snow began to fall again, large, gentle flakes that transformed the landscape into a blanket of white. The journey south would be challenging, but Grey Wolf moved with renewed purpose. For better or worse, he had chosen a path that would change both their lives forever. Behind them, Black Crow raised his arms in a blessing that followed them into the falling snow, a silent prayer that they would find what the spirits had intended all along. The journey south tested Grey Wolf's endurance to its limits. Winter had settled firmly over the mountains, transforming familiar trails into treacherous passages of ice and snow. He traveled mostly at night, when cavalry patrols were less likely to spot him, and sought shelter during daylight hours in caves or beneath dense evergreens. Little Star remained surprisingly resilient throughout their journey. Black Crow's medicines had worked well. The child's breathing stayed clear despite the cold air. Grey Wolf kept him warm against his chest beneath layers of rabbit fur, speaking to him constantly in Apache, telling stories of brave ancestors and the sacred mountains that sheltered them. On the third night, Grey Wolf crested a ridge and saw lights in the valley below, the trading post. Beyond it, several miles distant, more lights marked the location of Fort Bowie, where Captain Carter waited, unaware that his son was so near. Grey Wolf paused, studying the scene. Around the trading post, he counted 3 cavalry horses tied to a hitching post. Soldiers. His grip tightened instinctively around Little Star. Finding a sheltered position overlooking the trading post, Grey Wolf settled in to observe. For hours, he watched the comings and goings below. Shortly before midnight, the soldiers mounted their horses and rode back toward the fort, likely returning to report before their shift ended. Grey Wolf waited another hour before approaching the trading post. The windows were dark now. Gonzalez would be sleeping. Moving silently through the shadows, Grey Wolf circled the building, checking for guards or dogs. Finding none, he approached the rear door. He had nearly reached it when a voice spoke from the darkness. "I've been expecting someone like you." Grey Wolf froze, hand moving toward his knife. From the shadows of the porch emerged an older Mexican man, silver-haired and lean, a shotgun held casually at his side. "Gonzalez," Grey Wolf guessed. The trader nodded. "The soldiers come every day, asking about a missing child." His eyes moved to the bundle Grey Wolf carried. "I think perhaps you have what they seek. Will you betray us to them?" Grey Wolf asked directly. Gonzalez considered this, then shook his head. "I have no love for the bluecoats. They take what they want and pay what they choose." He gestured toward the door. "Come inside. It is too cold for the little one." The trading post's interior was warm and cluttered with goods of all descriptions: tools, fabrics, food, weapons, pelts. Gonzalez lit a single lamp, keeping it low to avoid attracting attention from outside. "The child belongs to Captain Carter?" he asked, studying Little Star's face in the dim light. "His wife died birthing him," Grey Wolf confirmed. "I found them and buried her, and now you return the son." Gonzalez nodded appreciatively. "Not many would do this." "I do not do it for the captain," Grey Wolf clarified. "No," Gonzalez agreed. "You do it for the boy." He reached for a nearby shelf and took down a small tin cup, pouring coffee for Grey Wolf. "The captain is half mad with grief and determination. He offers $1,000 for the child's return." "I want no white man's money," Grey Wolf said firmly. "Of course not." Gonzalez studied him thoughtfully. "What will you do after?" Grey Wolf had not thought beyond this moment, beyond ensuring Little Star's safe return. The emptiness waiting on the other side of this night stretched before him like a vast, barren plain. "My people are scattered," he said finally. "I will find them if I can." Gonzalez nodded, understanding the uncertainty of an Apache's future in a world increasingly dominated by whites. "Rest here tonight," he offered. "At dawn I will take the child to the fort myself." Grey Wolf tensed. "I must be certain he reaches his father safely." "You cannot approach the fort," Gonzalez warned. "They would shoot you on sight." Grey Wolf knew this was true, yet he could not simply hand Little Star over and disappear into the night. Not after all they had experienced together. "There is a place," Gonzalez said, noting Grey Wolf's reluctance. "A hill overlooking the fort. You could watch from there as I deliver the child." This compromise satisfied Grey Wolf. He would see Little Star safely returned before departing. As dawn approached, Grey Wolf prepared for their final separation. He bathed Little Star using warm water. Gonzalez provided and dressed him in clean clothing from the trader's stock. Around the child's neck, he placed the beaded medicine pouch from Black Crow. From his own neck, Grey Wolf removed a small clay pendant shaped like a thunderbird, a talisman his mother had made for him when he was a boy. He had carried it through every battle, every hardship. Now he slipped the leather cord over Little Star's head, tucking the pendant beneath the clean shirt. "Remember," he whispered, in Apache, touching his forehead to Little Star's, "even among your father's people, part of you will always be Apache." Little Star gazed up at him, tiny fingers reaching for Grey Wolf's face in a gesture that nearly broke the warrior's resolve. For a moment, Grey Wolf considered fleeing with the child, continuing their journey together, consequences be damned, but he knew that path would lead only to suffering for them both. Gonzalez waited discreetly by the door, giving Grey Wolf these final moments. When Grey Wolf finally nodded, the trader approached and carefully took Little Star in his arms. "I will tell them I found him abandoned at my doorstep," Gonzalez explained. "They need never know of you." Grey Wolf watched as Gonzalez wrapped Little Star in a clean blanket. The child began to fuss, as if sensing the impending separation. "He will have a good life with his father," Gonzalez assured Grey Wolf. "The captain is a harsh man, but he loves his son." Before departing, Grey Wolf touched Little Star's cheek one last time. "Grow strong, Little Star," he whispered. "Perhaps our paths will cross again in a better time." From the hill overlooking Fort Bowie, Grey Wolf watched as Gonzalez approached the gate with his precious cargo. He saw soldiers rush out, saw them take Little Star, saw the commotion as runners were dispatched to fetch Captain Carter. Finally, Grey Wolf glimpsed a tall figure in a cavalry uniform sprinting across the parade ground. Even at this distance, the man's desperate eagerness was evident in every movement. Captain Carter took his son in his arms, clutching him with the ferocity of grief, transformed into joy. Little Star was home. Grey Wolf's journey was complete. As he turned away, beginning the long trek back to the mountains, Grey Wolf felt both emptiness and peace. He had fulfilled his promise to the dying mother. He had followed the path the spirits had shown him. And perhaps, in years to come, Little Star would remember, not consciously, but in his heart, the Apache warrior who had carried him through danger and sacrifice to find his rightful place.